swaying in stillness, getting lost on the way to the peaceful abode of the soul's moon temple in the hurried flow of life. There are moments when we suddenly stop, feeling lost and empty. Life is like a chaotic piece of music, and we fumble to find a low note, a moment of silence for the soul to rest. It is in those moments that the door to the moon temple opens, welcoming tired hearts home. Tonight, I am incredibly grateful that you are here, joining me on a journey to discover an ancient mystery, a teaching that could change the way you perceive life forever. If you feel comfortable, please take a moment to share where you are in your current time. There is a magical beauty in knowing that, despite being thousands of miles apart and in different time zones, we are all finding a shared peace. Together, prepare a cozy space for yourself, a soft blanket, a warm cup of tea, or simply let yourself settle into the most comfortable position. Tonight, we will together explore an ancient Buddhist teaching called emptiness. Before you think this word sounds sad or scary, I promise you one thing. This teaching is actually one of the most serene and liberating truths humanity has ever discovered. When the Buddha first shared this wisdom more than 2,000 years ago, he had no intention of taking anything away from our lives. He was pointing out a natural freedom that has always been present, hidden beneath the surface of all our anxieties and stresses. Do you know that feeling when you are completely absorbed in a beautiful piece of music? Or watching clouds drift lazily across the sky, and suddenly all your worries seem to vanish? The spaciousness that you feel in those moments. That is what this teaching is truly about. The word emptiness does not mean your life is meaningless or that nothing matters. On the contrary, it means the exact opposite. It means that the solid walls of stress, the heavy burdens of anxiety, and the tight grip of afflictions, all of these are actually more like clouds than mountains. They are real, but they are also always changing, flowing, and ultimately, workable. Tonight, we will together explore 5 different layers of meaning of this teaching. Imagine you are exploring 5 different rooms in a house you thought you knew completely. Each room will offer you a new perspective on the cause of suffering and how you can find true liberation. We will go slowly and gently, so that each truth can soak naturally into your consciousness. The Buddha once said, "The world is empty," but he did not mean the world is without meaning, love, or beauty. He meant that it is without the sharp edges that cut us, without the solid barriers that imprison us, without the permanent problems that we imagine can never be changed. As we begin this journey, remember that you do not need to understand everything perfectly. Just let these ancient stories and gentle teachings wash over you like warm water. When we finish, you will discover that the peace you have been seeking was never truly lost. It was just obscured by very convincing thoughts about things being solid and separate. Let's begin with a story from long ago about a young monk who couldn't sleep because his mind was filled with anxiety. His discovery may be exactly what your heart needs to hear tonight. Part 1. The Emptiness of Self. The story of the young monk Chen. Once upon a time, there was a young monk named Chen, who lived in a quiet monastery nestled among rolling hills. Each night, as the other monks fell into a peaceful sleep, Chen would toss and turn on his simple bed, listening to the thoughts chasing each other like wild horses. Am I good enough? His mind would whisper. Am I making progress in my practice? What if I fail? What if I'm not worthy of peace? Night after night, these questions would swirl in his mind, each one feeling heavy, urgent, and completely real. At times, the weight of these thoughts seemed to crush Chen. He would try to listen to his breath, seeking stillness, but even his breath seemed to carry anxiety. Why can't I be at peace like the other monks? He would ask himself. Is there something wrong with me that I can't find rest? The more he tried to push these thoughts away, the more persistent they became, like trying to hold beach balls underwater. One morning, exhausted and disheartened, Chen went to his teacher, Master Lin. The old master was quietly sweeping the monastery courtyard. His movements were so natural and gentle that it seemed as if the broom was moving on its own. The soft sound of the bristles against the stone created a rhythm like a peaceful heartbeat. There was something in the master's presence that made Chen feel like he was drinking a cool sip of water on a hot day. "Master," Chen said, his voice heavy with fatigue, "I cannot find peace. Thoughts about myself keep me awake all night. I worry about whether I am good enough, whether I am making progress, or even if I exist as the person I think I should be. How can I find rest?" Master Lin continued sweeping for a long time, the gentle sound creating a pocket of stillness around them. A small bird landed nearby and began pecking at seeds scattered on the ground. Completely absorbed in its simple work, the morning light filtered through the leaves above, creating slow, dancing patterns of light and shadow on the stone courtyard. Finally, Master Lin stopped and looked at Chen with eyes full of deep kindness and a gentle hint of humor. "Chen," the master said softly, "when you hear the monastery bell, where does the music live?" Chen felt confused by the unexpected question. He had come seeking liberation from his tormenting thoughts, and his teacher was asking about music. "I'm not sure what you mean, Master," he said. "The music comes from the bell, doesn't it?" "Ah, yes," Master Lin said, setting the broom down carefully and sitting on a smooth stone bench. "Let us explore this mystery together. When our monastery bell rings at dawn, what creates the sound you hear?" "The bell," Chen replied, though something in his teacher's gentle tone suggested this might not be the full answer. He sat down beside his teacher, feeling the tension he had been carrying ease just a little. But the bell alone, sitting silently on its post, does not create any music. What else is needed? Chen thought for a moment, feeling as if he was being led down a path he had never realized was there. Someone must ring it. Yes. And then? Then the sound travels through the morning air. Good. And then what? And then I must have ears to hear it. Excellent. Master Lin nodded, his eyes twinkling with delight. So the experience you call hearing the monastery bell, where exactly does it happen? Is it in the bell itself? In the person who rings it? In the air in between? In your ears? Or in your mind? Chen began to answer and then stopped. The more he truly thought about the question, the more mysterious it became. The experience of hearing seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere at once. It was like trying to catch water with his hands, or like trying to find the exact place where blue turns into green in the sky. "I don't know, Master. This not knowing," Master Lin said with infinite gentleness, "is the beginning of wisdom. You see, Chen, you have been tossing and turning with worry about this thing you call yourself. But let me share with you what the Buddha discovered when he looked deeply into this mystery more than 2,000 years ago." What Master Lin was about to reveal to Chen was the Buddha's first and most foundational teaching on emptiness. This truth has changed the lives of countless people throughout history, offering them freedom from the very kind of mental anguish that kept Chen awake all night. It was a discovery so profound that it went to the very root of human suffering. The Buddha taught that when we look closely at any moment of experience, we find three parts, like a musical performance. In a musical performance, there is the musician, there is the instrument, and there is the music itself. All three are necessary for the music to arise. Without one of these three elements, there is no music. In the same way, the Buddha discovered that conscious experience always consists of three components: the sense object, the sense organ, and consciousness. Let me help you understand this with a story. Master Lin continued, his voice taking on the gentle rhythm of one sharing ancient wisdom. Imagine a brilliant piano player sitting at a beautiful grand piano. Her hands are graceful and well-trained, capable of creating the most delicate melodies. The piano itself is a masterpiece of craftsmanship, with perfectly tuned strings and keys that respond to the lightest touch. Let's explore this with that image. When the piano player places her fingers on the keys and begins to play, what happens? Her skilled touch creates vibrations in the strings, and these vibrations become sound waves that travel through the air. This music, these sound waves moving through space, becomes what the Buddha called the sense object. It is a thing capable of being experienced, like the scent of a flower or the warmth of the sun on your skin. The sense object exists independently of whether someone is there to experience it. Now, if you happen to be sitting in the concert hall and you have healthy ears, those ears become your sense organ for sound. Your ears are incredibly sophisticated instruments, more complex than even the most advanced technology humans have ever created. They can detect the smallest changes in air pressure and translate them into electrical signals that your brain can understand. Think about this miracle for a moment. These delicate structures inside your head can distinguish between thousands of different sounds, from the whisper of wind through leaves to the crashing of ocean waves. When the music from the piano arrives at your ears, when the sense object meets the sense organ, a miracle occurs. The experience we call hearing arises naturally and automatically. This hearing, this awareness of sound, is what the Buddha called consciousness. It is not a thing or an object, but the quality of knowing that makes experience possible. But here is where the Buddha's truth becomes revolutionary and deeply liberating. We instinctively say, "I hear the music." We imagine there is a solid, separate self that exists somewhere inside our body or mind. And this self is the one who is doing the hearing, the one who is having the experience. This seems so obvious and natural that we rarely question it. But when the Buddha looked deeply into this process with the meticulousness of a scientist and the wisdom of a sage, he discovered something extraordinary. This phenomenon of hearing is actually the result of what he called an automatic chain of causes and conditions. It is like a domino effect that happens all on its own without any separate doer or experiencer. The contact between the piano player's fingers and the keys causes the music. The contact between the music and your ears causes the experience of hearing the music. Without a piano player or a piano, there is no music. Without music or ears, there is no hearing of the music. Each part is completely dependent on the others. In this beautiful chain reaction, the Buddha asked, where exactly can we find a separate self who is in charge? Where is the independent experiencer that we imagine is having these experiences? It's like looking for the driver of a car that is actually driving itself. As the Buddha so precisely said, the ear is without a self or anything belonging to a self. Sounds, ear consciousness, and ear contact are all without a self or anything belonging to a self. He was not being abstract or philosophical. He was pointing out something that you can check for yourself right now in your own direct experience. Master Lin gently guided Chen through the same investigation. Chen, close your eyes for a moment and listen to the sounds around us. Chen did as he was told and immediately became aware of a symphony of natural sounds. There were birds calling to each other in the trees, the gentle rustling of leaves in the morning breeze, the distant gurgle of water from the monastery garden stream. Now, Master Lin continued softly, pay attention to what is actually happening as you hear these sounds. The birds create sound waves with their calls. These waves travel through the air like ripples on a pond. They arrive at your ears, which are like incredibly sensitive instruments tuned to detect these vibrations. Your ears translate these vibrations into signals your brain can understand. And then, mysteriously, hearing arises on its own. In this whole process, where is the separate Chen who is doing the hearing? Chen kept his eyes closed and listened more carefully than ever before. A light breeze was blowing through the nearby bamboo grove, creating a soft, rhythmic sound, like nature's own meditation chimes. As he followed his teacher's instructions, something amazing began to happen. The more he carefully looked for the person hearing the sounds, the more the sounds seemed to be hearing themselves. It was clear that hearing was happening. A vivid, clear, direct hearing, but there was no separate one who was doing the hearing. It was like discovering that what he had always thought was a solid wall was actually made of flowing water. The experience was still there, more vivid than ever, but the boundaries he had imagined were nowhere to be found. The Buddha applied this same careful investigation to all six senses. Yes, he considered the mind to be a sixth sense. Just like seeing or hearing, he found that seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, and thinking all happen as automatic processes that arise when the right causes and conditions are present. Each sense works in exactly the same way as the example of hearing we just explored. Let's explore this with the sense of sight to deepen our understanding. Right now, if you are in a place where you can see something, perhaps the device you are listening to, the wall of the room you are in, or your own hands, pay attention to what is happening in the process of seeing. Light waves are bouncing off the objects around you and traveling at an incredible speed toward your eyes. Your eyes, even more sophisticated than the most advanced cameras ever built, focus these light waves and turn them into electrical signals. As those signals arrive at your brain through the optic nerves, the experience we call seeing arises automatically. In this natural process, where is the separate seer? Where is the independent you who is doing the seeing? The same investigation applies to thinking itself, which is perhaps the most interesting of all. Thoughts arise in your consciousness based on a vast number of causes and conditions, your past experiences, your current situation, the food you have eaten, how much you have slept, the conversation you had yesterday, the book you read last month, today's weather, your body's chemistry, Memories triggered by a scent or a sound. These thoughts arise in consciousness automatically, just as sounds arise when the right conditions are in place for hearing. Where is the separate thinker that we imagine is creating these thoughts? Chen was beginning to discover what the Buddha had realized under the Bodhi tree centuries ago. If you investigate deeply enough, you find that your personal experience is actually completely impersonal. There is no separate you that experience is happening to. There is no experiencer who stands separate from the flow. There is only a beautiful, endless cycle of causes and conditions that extends infinitely into the past and future. Like an ocean with no beginning or end. But here is where this truth becomes incredibly practical for our daily struggles with stress and anxiety. The Buddha connected this understanding directly to why we suffer and how we can find true liberation. This was not just a philosophical discovery but a practical key to ending unnecessary suffering. This cycle of causes and conditions, this natural flow of experiences that arise and pass away, brings with it both pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Sometimes we hear music that makes our heart soar. Sometimes we hear sounds that are irritating or unpleasant. Sometimes we see beautiful sights that fill us with joy. Sometimes we see things that make us sad or afraid. Sometimes we have thoughts that make us feel confident and happy. Sometimes thoughts make us anxious, angry, or depressed. This is simply the natural flow of life. The Buddha discovered that what keeps us stuck in cycles of suffering and frustration is what he called our clinging and our aversion. We desperately try to hold on to the experiences we like and push away the experiences we do not. We become attached to the pleasant sounds, the pleasant sights, the pleasant thoughts, and we resist the unpleasant ones with all our might. All of this clinging and resisting is fueled by what our imagined self wants and fears. Think about the last time you felt truly stressed or upset. Maybe someone said something that hurt your feelings, or you received news that disappointed you, or you found yourself in a situation you desperately did not want to be in. Notice how the suffering comes not just from the experience itself, but from your resistance to it. There is the actual event. Perhaps a few words that were spoken or a piece of news that was received. And then there is your story about why this event should not be happening to you. Why it is unfair. Why it is a threat to or a diminishment of the you that you imagine yourself to be. The event itself may have only lasted a few moments, but the suffering from resisting it can last for hours, days, or even weeks. This is what the Buddha meant when he said that clinging and aversion are the fuel that keeps the wheel of suffering turning. But what if the you that is threatened, the you that is diminished, is actually more like an illusion? What if it is a convincing optical illusion created by the habit of thinking in terms of my experience and what I want and what threatens me? What if the person who feels attacked, the person who feels not good enough, the person who feels overwhelmed is no more solid than a character in a dream? Chen was discovering this for himself as he sat in the peaceful monastery courtyard with his teacher. The morning sun was warming his face, and he could feel something loosening inside of him. Like a knot that had been tied for so long he had forgotten it was there. "Master," he said softly, "if there is no separate me to have problems, then what are all my worries about me being a good monk or me making progress?" Master Lin smiled gently, his aged face radiating a peace that seemed to come from the deepest part of his being. "Those thoughts will still arise, Chen. Causes and conditions will still create the thought, am I good enough? Or, am I making progress? But now you can see these thoughts for what they are. Just other experiences that arise and pass away in the flow of consciousness. Like clouds drifting across the sky. You do not have to identify with them, resist them, or try to solve them. You can let them come and go naturally without assigning them the weight of a solid reality. This is the profound liberation that comes from understanding the Buddha's meaning of the emptiness of self. It is not about you disappearing or becoming nobody. It is about you stopping the imagined burden of being a separate somebody who has to control everything, fix everything, and defend against everything. You discover that you exist as something much vaster and more peaceful than you ever imagined. The Buddha described this realization as the key to ending suffering. Truly seeing that our sense of being a solid, separate self does not correspond to anything in reality is the discovery that unlocks the door to true peace. Living your life in alignment with this understanding is what the Buddha called nirvana. Not a place you go after you die, but a way of living in this very life, free from unnecessary suffering. Part 2. The Emptiness of All Things. The Story of the Young Monk Dao. A few months passed since Chen's sleepless nights gave way to peaceful rest. And another young monk named Dao arrived at the monastery. Unlike Chen, who struggled with worries about himself, Dao had a different kind of restlessness. He was always trying to understand and categorize everything around him, believing that if he could just figure out where one thing ended and another began, he would find the peace he was seeking. Dao would spend hours sitting in the garden, pointing to flowers and saying to himself, "This is a rose, that is a lily, this is dirt, that is air." He felt a strange comfort in creating these mental boundaries, as if the world made more sense when everything had its proper place and a clear boundary. But despite all his careful categorization, the peace he sought remained elusive. One afternoon, as autumn was painting the monastery courtyard with shades of gold and red, Dao went to Master Lin with a question that had been troubling him. The old master was sitting quietly by a small pond, watching the leaves drift gently on the water's surface. "Master," Dao said earnestly, "I have studied our teachings on emptiness and I think I understand that there is no separate self who experiences things. But surely things themselves are real and separate from one another. This pond is clearly different from that tree. And that tree is obviously separate from the sky behind it. How can I find peace in a world so full of different, separate objects, all demanding my attention?" Master Lin smiled gently and gestured toward a single leaf drifting near them. "Dao, tell me, where does this leaf end and the pond begin?" Dao looked at the leaf, confident in his answer. "That's easy, Master. The leaf is floating on top of the water. The leaf is the leaf and the pond is the pond. They are two entirely separate things." "I see." Master Lin nodded thoughtfully. "And tell me, could this leaf exist without the tree that gave birth to it?" "Well, no," Dao replied, though he was beginning to feel that his teacher was leading him somewhere unexpected. "And could the tree exist without the soil that nourished it?" "No, I suppose not." "And could the soil exist without the countless leaves that have fallen and decomposed to create it over many years?" Dao was silent for a moment, watching the leaf wobble gently in the water. Something in his certainty about separate objects began to feel less solid. What Master Lin was leading Dao toward was one of the most profound discoveries in all of Buddhist philosophy. About 600 years after the Buddha passed into nirvana, a brilliant philosopher named Nagarjuna took the Buddha's truth about the emptiness of self and extended it to everything that we experience. If the Buddha had pointed out that there is no solid, separate you who is experiencing things, Nagarjuna revealed that there are also no solid, separate things that are being experienced. This truth addresses something that troubles many of us in our daily lives. Even when we begin to understand that our sense of being a separate self may be an illusion, we still feel overwhelmed by all the different problems, challenges, and objects in our world. We look around and see so many separate things that seem to have the power to make us happy or miserable. Understanding Nagarjuna's discovery can completely transform this relationship. Let me guide you through this truth using something that you are experiencing right now. As you listen to these words, you are having an experience that seems clear and simple. You might say, "I am listening to a Buddhist teaching on emptiness. That seems simple enough. There is you and there is this teaching and you are experiencing it." But let's do what Nagarjuna taught us. Let's try to find the exact boundaries of this thing you are experiencing. At first glance, this teaching seems to consist of words being spoken at a certain pace, containing certain ideas about Buddhist wisdom. That's a reasonable description. But when we investigate more carefully, something interesting begins to happen. Could you have this experience of the teaching without the device you are listening on? Clearly not. The speakers or headphones that are playing these words are actually an essential part of your experience right now. Without them, the words could not reach you. So, should we include your device as part of what we call this teaching? But wait, could this teaching exist in your experience without the electricity that powers your device? Without the internet or cellular service that delivered it to you? Without the countless people who designed, built, and maintained all of this technology? When you really think about it, all of these elements are necessary conditions for your experience of this teaching right now. And what about your ears? Could you experience this teaching without the ears that allow you to hear? Those ears didn't appear out of nowhere. They are the result of millions of years of evolution, aren't they? They are connected to your entire body, which came from your parents and their parents, stretching back through countless generations. Should we include all of this evolutionary history as part of what makes this teaching possible? As we follow this investigation, something amazing begins to happen. We cannot find any single point where we can definitively say this teaching ends here and the rest of the universe begins. What seemed like a simple, separate thing, this audio teaching, begins to reveal itself as a form in which the entire universe is presenting itself to you in this moment. Back by the pond, Master Lin was guiding Dao through a similar investigation. Look at this drifting leaf more carefully. The old master said gently. You say it is separate from the pond. But let us investigate. This leaf was once part of that maple tree over there. That tree grew it by using nutrients from the soil, water from the rain, energy from the sun and carbon dioxide from the air. So, this leaf is actually made of soil, rain, sunlight, and air, isn't it? Dao nodded slowly, beginning to see where his teacher was headed. And where did the soil come from? Master Lin continued. It came from countless leaves, branches, and creatures that have lived and died and decomposed over thousands of years. And the rain, it came from oceans that evaporated, formed clouds that traveled a long way before releasing their water here. And the sunlight? It traveled 93 million miles from a star that has been burning for billions of years. As Dao listened, his sense of this leaf being an independent, separate object began to dissolve. He began to see what Nagarjuna had discovered, that what we call individual objects are actually meeting points where the entire web of existence becomes tangible. This is not just a philosophical curiosity. This truth has profound implications for how we deal with the stresses and challenges in our daily lives. Think about the last time you felt completely overwhelmed by a problem that seemed completely solid and insurmountable. Maybe it was a conflict with someone you care about, a financial worry, or a health issue that kept you awake at night. When we get caught up in these difficulties, we feel them as solid, separate objects that exist independently and have the power to harm us. But what if we applied Nagarjuna's investigation to these problems? What if that conflict in the relationship, for example, doesn't exist as a solid, separate thing, but as a meeting point of countless causes and conditions? Perhaps there was a misunderstanding that arose from different communication styles learned in childhood. Perhaps there is stress from work that is affecting how both people are reacting to each other. Maybe there are cultural differences, different expectations about relationships, past traumas that are coloring the present moment. Perhaps there are physical factors, hunger, fatigue, hormonal changes affecting mood and patience. All of these conditions and more are coming together to create what we call this relationship problem. But where exactly does this problem begin and end? Where are its solid boundaries? The more we investigate, the more we discover that even our most vexing problems are actually fluid processes that arise from causes and conditions, not solid obstacles blocking our path. Nagarjuna took this investigation even deeper. He found that everything also cannot exist without its opposite. There can be no concept of before without after, no up without down, no good without bad. Everything exists in relation to, in contrast to, in dependence on everything else. Think about something as simple as the idea of tall. A person who is tall compared to most people might be quite short compared to a professional basketball player. A building that seems tall in a small town might look tiny next to a skyscraper. Tall has no meaning on its own. It only exists in relation to short. The same is true for every quality we can think of, beautiful and ugly. Success and failure, happiness and sadness, they arise together, define each other, and cannot exist separately. This truth led Nagarjuna to a profound conclusion about the nature of everything we experience. He said that nothing possesses what he called svabhava, independent, inherent existence. Everything is what he called dependently originated, arising in dependence on countless other things. As he so beautifully wrote, there does not exist anything that is not dependently originated. Therefore, there does not exist anything that is not empty. Master Lin helped Dao understand this with a simple but profound example. Dao, look at the apple tree in our orchard. Can an apple exist separately from the tree it grew on? No, Master. Can the tree exist separately from the soil that nourished its roots? No. Can the soil exist separately from the earth that holds it? No. And can the earth exist separately from the solar system it travels through? Dao was beginning to feel a sense of awe as he followed this chain of interdependence. No, Master. It cannot. So tell me, Master Lin said with a gentle smile, where exactly does that simple apple begin and end? As the question settled into Dao's consciousness, he experienced something that many people discover when they truly grasp interdependence. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of it all, he felt a deep sense of liberation. If everything is connected to everything else, if nothing exists in isolation, then nothing, including his problems and anxieties, is as solid or permanent as it seems. But by this point, you might be feeling a bit confused or even worried. If everything is without independent existence, does that mean nothing exists at all? Does that mean this conversation we are having isn't real? Does that mean nothing matters? This is a natural concern, and Nagarjuna actually addressed it directly. He explicitly rejected what he called the wrong view that nothing exists. But he also said that the view that things exist independently is equally wrong. For him, both of these views were extremes that missed the complex, mysterious nature of what things are actually like. Nagarjuna taught what later became known as the middle way between these two extremes. Things do not exist in the solid, independent way we often imagine, but they also do not exist at all. They exist in this beautiful, interdependent way, just as music exists, or a rainbow exists, or reflections in water exist. They are real, vivid, and meaningful, but not solid or separate. Think about a rainbow for a moment. When you see one arcing across the sky after a storm, it is undeniably beautiful and real. You can point to it, take a picture of it, feel moved by its beauty. But if you try to go to the place where the rainbow seems to be, you will never arrive. It has no solid location that you can visit. The rainbow arises from the coming together of sunlight, water droplets, and your specific angle of perception. It is real, but it is also without independent existence. This is how Nagarjuna understood everything in our experience, real and vivid, but arising from the interdependent coming together of causes and conditions, not existing as solid, separate objects. This understanding of the middle way brings tremendous relief when we apply it to our daily stresses and anxieties. Think about a time when you felt completely overwhelmed by a problem in your life. Maybe it was a work deadline that seemed impossible to meet, a family situation that felt hopeless, or a health issue that kept you awake at night. When we get caught up in these difficulties, we feel them as completely solid and permanent, don't we? They feel like immovable mountains blocking our path to happiness. But when we remember Nagarjuna's truth about dependent origination, we begin to see these problems differently. That impossible work deadline, for example, is not a solid, independent thing. It is arising from many causes and conditions, perhaps poor planning, unexpected complications, unrealistic expectations, a lack of resources, or a communication breakdown. Each of these contributing factors is itself dependently originated. The poor planning may have arisen from being overwhelmed with other responsibilities. The unexpected complications may have come from factors outside of anyone's control. The unrealistic expectations may have a cultural or personal history behind them. When we look at problems in this way, something amazing happens. Instead of feeling like a victim of solid, unchangeable circumstances, we begin to see that we are dealing with fluid processes that can be skillfully worked with. Since these difficulties arose from causes and conditions, they can also change as causes and conditions change. This does not diminish the reality of our challenges. They are still real, just as a rainbow is real, but it reveals something hopeful about their nature, since they are not solid walls, but patterns of interdependent causes. They are much more workable than they initially appear. Nagarjuna taught that when we truly understand the interdependent nature of everything, including our own suffering, we naturally develop both wisdom and compassion. We gain wisdom because we see that our problems are not solid entities that can permanently block our happiness. We develop compassion because we see that the difficult behaviors of others also arise from complex webs of causes and conditions. That person who was rude to you at the store today, their rudeness didn't arise out of nowhere. Perhaps they received bad news that morning, or they are dealing with chronic pain, or they learned defensive communication patterns from a difficult childhood. Just as your reactions arise from causes and conditions, so do theirs. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it helps us to respond with understanding rather than reactive anger. Back by the pond, Dao was beginning to experience this shift in perspective. As he watched the leaves drifting on the water, He no longer saw separate objects demanding to be categorized and controlled. Instead, he saw a beautiful dance of interdependence, the water supporting the leaves that had fallen from a tree that was nourished by soil that was created by generations of leaves that had fallen before. Everything was connected to everything else in an endless, mutually supportive web. Master, Tao said softly, I feel like I have been trying to catch clouds with my hands. All this time I thought peace would come from understanding where everything begins and ends. But now I see that nothing really begins or ends. Everything is just this continuous flowing together. Master Lin nodded with deep appreciation. This is the gift Nagarjuna gave to the world. The understanding that emptiness and interdependence are the same truth looked at from different angles. When we see that nothing has independent existence, we also see that everything is intimately connected to everything else. This is the web of emptiness that holds and supports all of life. As you yourself rest in this understanding, you may notice how it naturally brings both peace and compassion. Peace because you no longer have to carry the burden of believing you are separate from the world around you. Compassion because you see that everyone and everything is part of the same interconnected web of existence. Part 3. The Emptiness of Consciousness, the Story of Tao. Chen. In the sunset, several seasons passed since Chen first found peace from seeing through the illusion of a separate self. And Tao found freedom in understanding the interdependent nature of all things. The monastery had become quieter in a way, more spacious as both monks learned to rest in the natural flow of existence instead of struggling against it. But their discoveries had opened a door to an even deeper mystery. One evening, as the three of them sat together watching the sun set behind the mountains, a new question arose. The sky was painted with shades of orange and yellow, and a profound stillness had settled over the world. Chen and Tao had been sharing their truths with each other, amazed at how their different discoveries seemed to point to the very same truth. Master, Chen said thoughtfully, I now understand that there is no separate self having experiences. And Tao has helped me see that the things we experience are not truly separate from each other either. But there is one thing I am curious about. If there is no separate experiencer and no separate things being experienced, then what is the experience itself? Tao nodded eagerly. Yes, that is what I have been wondering as well. Even though I can't find solid boundaries anywhere, it's clear that something is happening. Right now, we are seeing this beautiful sunset, hearing the evening birds, feeling the cool air. What is this consciousness that seems to contain all of these experiences? Master Lin smiled with the gentle delight of a teacher whose students were ready for one of the most profound truths a human can discover. What they were asking about had been explored in great depth by a remarkable school of Buddhist philosophy called Yogacara. These were masters of both philosophical investigation and deep meditative practice, and their discovery would reveal one more layer of meaning of the teaching of emptiness that could transform how we understand the very nature of consciousness and reality. Let us explore this mystery together, Master Lin said softly. But first, let me ask both of you something. He gestured toward the sweeping orange light in the western sky. Chen, what is the difference between that beautiful orange color and your experience of seeing that orange color? Chen looked at the sunset, then closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Something in his teacher's question seemed to be pointing to a mystery he had never noticed before. I'm not sure I understand the question. Master, the orange is there in the sky, and I am here seeing it. Aren't they two different things? Are they? Master Lin asked with gentle curiosity. Can you have the experience of seeing orange if there is no orange to see? Well, no, Chen replied. I obviously can't see a thing that isn't there. Good. Master Lin nodded. No object. You cannot experience the object. That seems clear enough. But now, let me ask you the reverse question. If you were not seeing this orange right now, would it exist? Chen began to answer quickly, then stopped. This seemed like it should have a clear answer. But something about the way his teacher asked it made him think again. Of course, the orange would still exist if I didn't see it. Colors don't just disappear when I close my eyes. There is orange in sunsets all over the world. In flowers, in autumn leaves, in paintings. Ah, Master Lin said with a twinkle in his eye. You know about the orange in sunsets all over the world because you have seen sunsets before. You know about orange flowers because you have seen them. You know about orange in paintings because you have looked at paintings. In every case you can think of. How do you know the orange exists? Tao was listening intently. sensing that they were getting close to something profound. Through seeing it, he said slowly, all of the evidence we have that orange exists comes from someone seeing it. Exactly. Master Lin smiled. If I close my eyes now and you continue to watch the sunset, you will find that the orange has not disappeared. But the evidence that it has not disappeared is that you are seeing it. If another person looks at a sunset while we both turn away, their seeing will confirm that the orange is still there. But notice one interesting thing. Our experience of seeing is always the ground upon which we confirm that anything exists. What Master Lin was leading them toward was one of the most revolutionary truths discovered by the Yogacara masters. These brilliant philosophers and meditators made a discovery that challenged our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. Through a combination of deep meditative experience and their philosophical genius, they found that what we call the object of experience is actually inseparable from what we call the experience itself. Try this, Master Lin gently suggested. Close your eyes and imagine the color orange. Both monks did as he told them. Now, can you imagine a color without actually seeing it? That's impossible, Chen said with a sense of wonder. The moment I imagine orange, I am seeing it in my mind's eye. I can't think about a color without seeing it. This points to something extraordinary. Master Lin continued, the orange and the seeing of the orange are like two sides of the same coin. Like the two full and empty halves of a glass. One has no meaning without the other. One cannot be said to exist without the other. The Yogacara masters discovered this same inseparable relationship between all objects and the consciousness that is aware of them. But they didn't stop at objects. They applied the same investigation to what we call the subject or the experiencer of consciousness. Now let me ask both of you something else, Master Lin said as they opened their eyes and returned their attention to the sunset. Dao, right now, as you see this orange sky, are you seeing it if you are not seeing it? Dao chuckled softly at the question that seemed so obvious. Of course not, Master. If I'm not seeing it, then I'm not seeing it. To see something, you must be seeing it. Good, Master Lin nodded. Your experience cannot be happening if you are not having the experience. This seems natural, but now, let us ask the reverse question. Right now, as you look at this orange sunset, do you exist separately from this scene of the orange? The question hung in the air like the night mist that was beginning to collect in the valleys below. Dao thought carefully, sensing that his answer might reveal something he had never realized before. If I existed separately from this scene of the orange, then I would be in one place and the seeing would be in another. He said slowly, but then I would be experiencing something else entirely and this orange would not be seen by anyone. That doesn't make sense. Beautifully discovered, Master Lin said with deep appreciation. You see, there is simply no place we can draw a dividing line between you as an experiencer and your experience. You as an experiencing subject and your experience are completely codependent for their existence. This is just like the old question about which came first, the chicken or the egg. They are two opposite sides that go together, co-arising each other and unable to exist separately. The Yogacara masters discovered that subject and object are exactly like this. They seem separate, but they actually arise together and are without independent existence. So, Master, are you saying, Chen said with growing excitement, that me, this orange, and my seeing of the orange are different names for the same thing looked at from different angles? Now you are beginning to see what these great masters discovered. Master Lin replied with delight. When the Yogacara masters used the term emptiness, they meant that the division of experience into a subject and an object is not real. Subject and object are like a front side and a back side. Two faces of a single coin. But front and back are just conventional terms we use to describe different aspects of a single thing. In reality, we never find one without the other. Only the coin itself is real and contains all of itself. Any division we might impose on it are artificial labels created by the duality in our thinking. As the three of them sat in the setting sun, a profound truth began to dawn on both young monks. This indivisible whole of subject, object, and the experience that connects them is how the Yogacara masters understood all of reality. For them, all that truly exists is experience itself. Master, Dao said softly, are you saying that all that we think of as the world is actually appearing within consciousness as images appear on a screen? Master Lin's eyes lit up with delight. That is a wonderful way to understand it. He said, "Let me share a way of looking at this that may make it even clearer. Right now, you are probably listening to my words through some kind of device." Master Lin continued, speaking as if he could see the future to this very moment when you may be hearing this teaching. Think about the screen or the speaker that is making this conversation possible. On that screen, you can watch something happy, like children playing in a garden. You can watch something sad, like news of a natural disaster. You can watch something inspiring, like people helping one another in a time of need. You can watch something disturbing, like violence or conflict. These are all completely different kinds of content that can appear on your screen. Each of these will bring a completely different experience. Master Lin continued, "Some may make you laugh. Others may make you cry. Still others may fill you with hope or anxiety. And yet, through all of them, the screen itself remains completely unchanged. Watching something beautiful does not make the screen beautiful. Watching something disturbing does not make the screen anxious. The screen can display any content, but it is never affected by what appears on it." Chen was beginning to see where this was leading. "The screen is like our consciousness," he said with wonder. "It can contain any experience without being changed by that experience." "Yes," Master Lin nodded, "but there is something even more important to notice. The screen upon which the images appear is not a part of any particular image. At the same time, no image can appear without the screen. All the time you are watching any video, you have been looking at the screen, even though the screen itself is never the subject of what you are watching. Until now," Dao added with a smile. "Right now, this teaching is pointing to the screen itself." "Precisely," Master Lin said with deep satisfaction. "And this is what I want both of you to investigate right now. Look at your own conscious awareness, the screen upon which all of your experiences appear." As the last light faded from the western sky and the first stars began to appear, both monks turned their attention inward with a quality of gentle curiosity they had learned from their teacher. What they were about to discover was something that could change their understanding of who and what they truly are. Notice that our different experiences appear in different ways. Master Lin gently guided them. Chen's childhood memories appear in one way in his consciousness, and Dao's memories appear in another way in his. Chen's body sensations are different from Dao's. Your thoughts, emotions, perceptions, all of these appear differently on the screen of your individual consciousness. But what about the screen itself? What about the conscious presence in which all of these experiences appear? This question opened a door to one of the most profound discoveries human consciousness can make. The Yogacara masters found that while the content of consciousness changes from person to person and from moment to moment, consciousness itself has certain unchanging qualities that are the same for everyone. Let's explore this together systematically. Master Lin suggested. First, notice that your conscious awareness is luminous. I use the word luminous here to mean that it naturally illuminates whatever appears in it. Anything that appears in your consciousness is immediately and effortlessly known. It's like a mirror that instantly reflects whatever appears in front of it. Can your conscious awareness ever lack this quality of being luminous? No, Chen said with recognition, because if it did, it would not be conscious awareness. It is as if consciousness is naturally awake. Anything that appears in it is instantly known without any effort. Second, Master Lin continued, notice that your conscious awareness is without preference. It is without resistance and clinging. When something pleasant appears, like the taste of fresh fruit, it is completely welcomed and then naturally let go. When something unpleasant appears, like the pain of a small cut, it is also completely welcomed and then naturally let go. Consciousness itself does not try to hold on to the pleasant or push away the unpleasant. But Master, Dao interjected, I certainly have preferences and resistances. I certainly try to hold on to pleasant experiences and avoid unpleasant ones. Yes, Master Lin agreed with a gentle smile. But notice the difference between your mind and your consciousness. Your mind is your thinking, your willing, your personality. These things may resist certain experiences and cling to others. But your conscious awareness is the thing that experiences these resistances and clingings. It is the field in which they appear as objects. Consciousness itself remains open and unreactive, like the sky that contains all weather without being disturbed by storms or sun. This distinction was key to what the Yogacara masters discovered. They found that what we commonly call ourself is actually a collection of thoughts, emotions, memories, and sensations that appear in consciousness. But consciousness itself, The knowing presence in which all these experiences appear has a completely different nature. Third, Master Lin continued, notice that your conscious awareness is empty. It can contain any thought, emotion, sensation, and experience because it is itself not all of those thoughts, emotions, sensations, and experiences. It is like the space of an empty room that can be filled with furniture precisely because it is itself without furniture. Can your conscious awareness ever lack this spacious, empty nature? No, Chen said with recognition, because if it did, it would be an object appearing within consciousness and not consciousness itself. Finally, Master Lin said, notice that your conscious awareness is outside of time and space. Time and space appear within it as objects of experience. But consciousness itself cannot be located anywhere in time or space. Right now your consciousness is present. This morning your consciousness was present. Tonight your consciousness will be present. It is always right here. Right now, no matter what appears within it. Can your conscious awareness ever belong to time or space? No, Tao replied, because if it did, it would have a form and a duration, a beginning and an end. But consciousness itself is the unchanging presence in which all change appears. As both monks investigated these qualities, something extraordinary began to dawn on them. Tao was the first to articulate what they were both discovering. Master, he said with wonder, when I look for the qualities of my consciousness and Chen looks for the qualities of his, we cannot find any difference between them. The consciousness that knows my thoughts and the consciousness that knows his thoughts seem to be the same consciousness. Yes, Master Lin said with deep satisfaction. When we compare what we call your conscious awareness with what we call my conscious awareness, we find not a single difference between them. When we are comparing two things and we find not a single difference between them, what must we conclude? That they are one and the same. Chen whispered, his voice filled with awe. This discovery is at the heart of what the Yogacara masters called Buddha nature or Tathagatagarbha. They taught that even though we appear to be without a personal self, at our deepest core, we find the fully enlightened, selfless, and liberated consciousness of the Buddha himself. The reason we don't usually experience these enlightened qualities is because our Buddha nature is temporarily obscured by layers of conditioning. Like clouds temporarily obscuring the sun. Remember how this teaching pointed to the screen upon which experiences appear? Master Lin asked gently. The teaching did not create the screen. The screen was always there, unchanging, completely separate from its content. Beyond the dimensions of whatever appears on it, the screen was always present. The same is true of your Buddha nature. Just as all the different videos that anyone might ever watch appear on one and the same screen. All the different personalities, all the different life stories, all the different individual selves are appearances in one and the same consciousness. Your personal history, my personal history, the stories of everyone who has ever lived. All of these are appearances within the luminous mind of what Buddhists call the Tathagatagarbha. This truth had a profound implication for how they understood not only themselves but also the people they met. As Master Lin explained, when you meet a person who seems very different from you, a person with different views, different backgrounds, different personality, you can remember that their essential consciousness is the same consciousness that you are. Their thoughts and emotions may be different. Their life story may be different. But the knowing presence in which their experiences appear is no different from the knowing presence that you are. The Buddha said in ancient scriptures, hidden within the afflictions of greed, hatred, and delusion, there is the wisdom of the Tathagata, the vision of the Tathagata, and the body of the Tathagata. All sentient beings, though they see themselves with all kinds of afflictions, have a Tathagata that is never defiled and is full of virtues that are no different from mine. But Master, Chen said thoughtfully, if this is true, why don't we always experience this enlightened consciousness? Why do we still get caught up in anxiety, fear, and anger? Master Lin smiled with infinite compassion. Think of it this way, he said, imagine a perfect mirror that has become covered in dust over many years. The mirror itself is always pure and perfect, capable of reflecting everything clearly. But when it is covered in dust, its reflections appear blurry and distorted. The dust does not change the essential nature of the mirror, but it temporarily obscures its clarity. Our Buddha nature is like that perfect mirror. He continued, it is always present, always pure, always conscious, but it can be temporarily obscured by what we might call the dust of ignorance, old thought habits, emotional patterns we learned in childhood, cultural beliefs that limit our understanding. The goal of Buddhist practice is like gently wiping the dust from the mirror. This understanding changes how we approach personal and spiritual growth. Instead of trying to become someone else or achieve some special state, we begin to recognize what we already are beneath the temporary obscurations. We begin to see that peace, love, and wisdom are not qualities we need to acquire, but qualities of our essential nature that we can uncover. There is a beautiful image in the ancient scriptures. Master Lin shared. It compares our Buddha nature to pure honey hidden in a tree, surrounded and protected by a swarm of bees. The honey is precious and sweet, but most people are afraid to approach it because of the bees. But if someone learns the right technique, they can gently pacify the bees and safely harvest the honey. Just as the honey is surrounded by bees, we all have this Buddha nature inside of us, surrounded by the protective mechanisms of our personality, our fears, our defensive patterns. But if we learn the right approaches, meditation, mindfulness, compassion, understanding, we can gently work with these protective patterns and discover the sweetness that was always there. As the evening deepened and the stars grew brighter overhead, both monks were experiencing a profound shift in how they understood themselves and their relationship to the world. The anxious, unworthy Chen who used to toss and turn all night had been revealed to be a temporary appearance in a consciousness that was inherently peaceful. The restless, categorizing Tao who had tried to organize everything into separate boxes had been revealed to be a temporary activity in a consciousness that was inherently vast and whole. Master, Tao said softly, I am beginning to understand why this is called the ultimate teaching of emptiness. It is not that we don't exist, but that we exist as this vast, conscious presence, not as the limited, separate persons we imagine ourselves to be. Yes, Master Lin nodded, and notice how this naturally brings compassion. When you see that your essential nature and the essential nature of every other person is the same conscious presence, how can you not feel connected to all sentient beings? Their suffering becomes your suffering because it is happening in the same consciousness. Their joy becomes your joy for the same reason. Part 4. The emptiness of all views and beliefs, the story of Maya. Priya, Chen, and Tao. Seasons had passed since Chen first went to Master Lin about his sleepless nights, and the monastery had become a place where deep wisdom seemed to flow as naturally as the mountain streams. Chen, Tao, Maya, and Priya had all discovered layers of emptiness that had changed their lives completely. You might think their journey was complete, but Master Lin had been observing something troubling in his beloved students. Despite all their profound truths, they had begun speaking about emptiness and Buddha nature with a kind of certainty that worried him. They would discuss these teachings with newcomers as if they were absolute truths that everyone should understand in the same way. They had, without realizing it, begun to cling to their truths, as if these truths were solid possessions rather than temporary fingers pointing toward the mystery. One morning, as the early mist was lifting from the valleys below, Master Lin called his 4 students together for what he said would be their most important teaching. They gathered in the small meditation room, their faces radiating with eagerness, ready to receive whatever wisdom their beloved teacher was about to share. My dear students, Master Lin began, his voice carrying an unusual seriousness. You have all made discoveries that have brought you great peace and understanding. But I need to share something with you that may at first be unsettling. Everything I have taught you, everything you have learned, everything the Buddha himself has said, all of it is not real. The silence that followed this statement was profound and unnerving. Chen was the first to speak, his voice uncertain. Master, I do not understand. These teachings have changed our lives. How can they not be real? Maya nodded, looking confused. The realization of Buddha nature has brought me such peace. She said, are you saying that realization was false? Master Lin smiled with infinite compassion, knowing that what he was about to reveal was perhaps the most difficult and most liberating teaching of all. Let me tell you a story, he said gently. Once upon a time there was a teacher who spent decades teaching his students about the profound truths of existence. His teachings were beautiful, inspiring, and truly helpful. Students came from all over to learn from him, and many found great liberation through his words. But as this teacher grew old, he noticed something troubling. He saw that some of his most devoted students had begun to worship his teachings instead of using them as tools for awakening. They would quote his words as if they were scripture. They would argue with people from other traditions about whose teachings were more correct. They had become so attached to the beauty of his concepts that they had forgotten that the concepts were meant to point to something beyond themselves. So one day, this wise teacher gathered his students together and said something that shocked them to their core. "Everything I have taught you is a lie," he declared. "Every word I have spoken, every truth I have shared, every method I have given you, all of it is false." His students were distraught, but then the teacher continued. "These lies have served their purpose if they have helped you to discover the truth that cannot be spoken. Now you must let go of even my lies, or they will become prisons instead of keys." Tao began to understand, though the understanding felt like standing on shifting ground. "Master, are you saying that even the most profound teachings are just tools to be used and then discarded? Let me share with you what the greatest Buddhist philosophers discovered about this." Master Lin replied, "They realized that there are two kinds of truth: conventional truth and ultimate truth. It is a conventional truth that my name is Master Lin and that I am your teacher. It is a conventional truth that you are 4 individual students learning about Buddhism. These conventional truths are not false. They describe our shared reality in ways that allow us to function and communicate. But we have also discovered ultimate truths." He continued, "Ultimately there are no separate individuals, no solid objects, no independent existence anywhere. Ultimately we are all manifestations of the same consciousness appearing as different forms in the dance of awareness. These ultimate truths are also not false. They point to the deepest nature of reality. The danger comes when we forget that even our most precious ultimate truths are expressed in conventional language. Language takes the infinite complexity and mystery of existence and forces it into words and concepts that the human mind can grasp. This is like trying to capture the ocean in a teacup. The teacup can hold a little bit of the ocean's water. And this water is truly ocean water. But the teacup is not the ocean. And if we mistake the teacup for the ocean, we will limit our understanding instead of expanding it." Priya was listening intently, her usual radiance tempered by the seriousness of what was being revealed. "So Master, are you saying that even when we talk about emptiness or Buddha nature, we are still using concepts that cannot fully grasp the reality they point to?" "Exactly." Master Lin nodded. "There is a beautiful image used in the teachings on this. Imagine a person pointing to the moon on a clear night. A wise person looks at the finger to see where it is pointing, and then follows that direction to see the moon. But a foolish person becomes fascinated with the finger itself and never looks up to see the thing it is pointing to. Even worse, they might begin to argue with other people about how their finger is pointing more correctly than someone else's. Meanwhile, the moon, the reality that all the fingers are pointing to, remains unnoticed. All spiritual teachings, no matter how profound, are fingers pointing to the moon. The teachings on emptiness that have meant so much to you are fingers. The realization of Buddha nature that has brought you peace is a finger. Even the Buddha's own words are fingers pointing to a reality that cannot be captured by words. This does not make the teachings worthless. They are invaluable fingers pointing in the right direction. But mistaking any teaching for the reality it points to is like mistaking the finger for the moon." Master Lin could see that this teaching was challenging everything his students thought they knew. And he knew that this challenge was necessary for their complete liberation. There is something even more radical that some of the Buddhist scriptures reveal. He continued, "In one of the most important Mahayana scriptures, it says that there is no ignorance and no cessation of ignorance. There is no suffering and no knowledge of suffering. There is no cause of suffering and no abandonment of the cause. There is no cessation of suffering and no realization of cessation. And there is no path and no development of the path." Chen looked astonished. "But Master, those are the 4 noble truths that the Buddha taught. Are you saying the scripture is rejecting the Buddha's most foundational teaching? This is why this aspect of emptiness is so dangerous." Master Lin replied soberly. "It seems to be saying that even the most sacred teachings are ultimately without the solid reality we assign to them. But this is not nihilism. It is not saying that nothing matters or that the teachings are worthless. It is pointing to something much more subtle and liberating. You see, much of our suffering comes not just from our circumstances, but from our rigid views and opinions about those circumstances. We create mental maps for how life should be, how people should behave, how spiritual practice should unfold, what enlightenment should look like. Then we suffer when reality doesn't match our maps. Even our spiritual concepts can become a source of suffering if we cling to them too tightly. We can suffer because we think we are not enlightened enough, or because others don't understand the teachings in our way, or because the world does not reflect the wisdom we have discovered. Maya was beginning to see how this applied to her own experience. I think I have done this, she admitted softly. I became so attached to the idea that I found peace through understanding Buddha nature that I was sad when I sometimes still felt sad. I was judging my sadness as a sign that I didn't truly understand the teaching. And I have done that as well. Dao added. I became so convinced that interdependence was the ultimate truth that I grew frustrated with people who still think in terms of separate objects. I was trying to convert people to my understanding instead of meeting them where they are. This is why this final understanding of emptiness is so important, Master Lin said with deep appreciation for their honesty. It is a safety measure, a reminder left by the greatest Buddhist teachers for us to take the teachings seriously, very seriously, but not too seriously. To cherish all the teachings, theories, models, and concepts, but not to cherish them more than we cherish life itself. The human mind is simply too linear, too dualistic, and too limited to grasp ultimate truth. He continued, our minds operate by creating categories, by making distinctions, by building conceptual models. This is wonderful for navigating daily life, but reality itself is far more fluid, mysterious, and paradoxical than any concept can contain. The great philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein realized this when he wrote, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. Chen felt both unsettled and liberated by this teaching. So does this mean we should stop studying Buddhist philosophy altogether? He asked. Not at all, Master Lin smiled. It means we should study with what I call a gentle hand. Hold your understanding lightly, like holding a butterfly. Hold it firm enough that it doesn't fly away, but gentle enough that you don't crush its delicate wings. Use the teachings as skillful means to point you to the truth. But remember that the truth they point to is outside of all teachings. This understanding naturally brings humility. He continued, when you know that your most profound truths are still just fingers pointing to the moon, you become curious about what the moon looks like from other angles. You become interested in how other traditions, other teachers, other students point to the same ineffable reality. Instead of defending your understanding, you become eager to learn how your understanding can be deepened or broadened. Priya nodded eagerly, like realizing that everyone is trying to describe the same mountain, but they are all looking at it from different sides. She said, my description isn't wrong, but it isn't complete either. Perfect, Master Lin agreed, and this understanding also brings tremendous freedom in how you deal with your own spiritual journey. You can engage fully in practices and teachings without having to carry the burden of having to do them exactly right. You can make mistakes, change your understanding, explore new perspectives without feeling as if you have failed in some way. You can be a sincere seeker without having to be a rigid dogmatist. There is a deeper freedom that comes from this understanding as well. Master Lin continued, when you realize that ultimate truth cannot be captured in concepts, you naturally become more present to what is actually happening, rather than to your ideas about what is happening. Your attention shifts from the map to the territory. You become more interested in the actual experience of this moment than in whether this moment fits your spiritual concepts. This is a profound form of liberation. Maya was feeling a lightness she had not experienced before. It's like I can stop trying to be a perfect Buddhist and just be present with what is true right now. She said with a sense of relief. I can let my sadness be sadness and my joy be joy without needing to fit them into any spiritual framework. Yes, Master Lin said warmly. And notice how this does not devalue what you have learned. Your understanding of emptiness is still precious. Your realization of Buddha nature is still transformative. But now these truths can flow more naturally because they don't have to carry the weight of having to be absolute truths. They can simply be helpful perspectives that serve life when they are helpful and recede when they are not needed. Conclusion. The return of the Master. Master Lin concluded his story with a profound reminder. One that was not just for his students but for all who were listening. The ultimate freedom comes from being able to use concepts when they are helpful and set them aside when they are not. without being identified with any position. It's like learning how to dance. Priya said with sudden understanding. When you are learning, you have to think carefully about each step. But once you know how to dance, the steps become invisible, and you just move with the music. Perfect, Master Lin said. This is the final goal of all spiritual teachings, to make themselves unnecessary by awakening you to the natural wisdom that has always been present. Chen felt a deep gratitude welling up inside him. Master, how can we thank you for these teachings that have taught us to not depend on teachings? He asked with a smile. By living with the freedom and compassion that these understandings naturally bring. Master Lin replied, by being present with what life is actually like, rather than what your concepts say it should be like. By holding all of your views lightly while engaging fully with whatever life brings. By remembering that everyone is trying to find their way home to the same truth even if their map looks very different from yours. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky with brilliant shades of orange and purple, the five of them sat in a shared silence of deep appreciation for the journey they had shared. They had explored the emptiness of self, the emptiness of objects, the emptiness of the subject-object division, the emptiness of the ordinary enlightened division, and finally the emptiness of all concepts and views. Each understanding had prepared them for the next, like climbing a mountain where each level of elevation revealed a more vast and comprehensive perspective. But more than understanding, they had discovered a way of being that was both completely engaged with life and completely free from the suffering that comes from clinging to any particular view of life. They had learned to dance with existence rather than trying to control or solve it. They had found the freedom that comes from holding everything lightly while loving everything deeply. For you, who have joined us on this journey through the teachings of emptiness, perhaps you have tasted this freedom as well. Perhaps you have discovered that what you are is spacious enough to contain any experience, peaceful enough to remain calm in any storm, and loving enough to embrace whatever appears. Perhaps you have found that the peace you have been seeking was never truly lost, just temporarily overlooked in the busyness of looking for it somewhere else. The greatest gift of these ancient teachings is not any particular truth or understanding, but the realization that you are already free, already whole, already home. Everything else, all the concepts, all the practices, all the teachings, are just different ways of pointing you back to this simple, direct, ever-present truth. In the end, there is nowhere to go and nothing to gain because what you are seeking is what you are. And what you are has never been absent for a single moment.